Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a short little bonus episode because, well, Meredith is out of town, and sometimes my wife fills in as my podcast co-host, and she's working late. There's a thunder snowstorm going on outside. This may be the last thing I ever record of myself. We all may die horribly. So I'm going to spend this maybe about 20 minutes the best way I know how. And it's reacting to what people have said on social media. More specifically, look, the last podcast was kind of about Cocaine Bear, but not really. It was a rambling mess with our first guest, Mr. Jason Kruger from the Monday Night Comedy Show and many other things. But this, I posted on just Facebook. I was like, yeah, Cocaine Bear was kind of a missed opportunity. I found myself bored during parts of it, even though it was only 95 minutes long. And the reactions I got are almost more what I'm going to review here than the movie. And there was a lot of them. And if you think this is about you, it is. I normally say it's not, but it definitely is this time. And I'm not saying that it was poorly shot. I'm not saying that the audio was bad. I'm not saying that it didn't work the way a real movie works, right? Here's some other things I'm not saying. I'm not saying that, it was too violent or it was not violent enough. It was actually fairly violent. Fine, whatever. Cool. You know, I played Mortal Kombat 1 in the arcade. I'm 42 years old. I heard all the senators being like, this game is violent. I'm on the right side of this whole violence thing. The side where it's lots of fun. And in the words of Quentin Tarantino, I think. But no, it's not that. And then someone was like, well, would you expect it to be realistic? I'm like, are you fucking stupid? No. First of all, I wasn't really terribly vague in my post. I kind of complained about, I think I did specifically say that I was bored. And I did specifically say that it was a bit of a missed opportunity. And it's a huge missed opportunity. Because here's what this movie was. All right? And I know this is why this is not going to, even this explanation is not going to fly with people. But in text on Facebook, it's even harder to really make your point. So I'm going to scream to no one about this. But it's just a slasher movie. And in my opinion, that's dumb. Okay? Not because I don't like slasher movies. I mean, I also don't care. And that's the thing. There's a lot of people in my sphere of connected well-wishers and friends and acquaintances and stuff that are way into like metal and horror movies and shit. And they'll listen to anything with a fucking distorted guitar turned up really loud in it that goes fast. And they'll watch any movie that has like violence and jump scares and things in it. Like, yeah. Okay, and yeah, they'll be like, well, this one was a little cheesy, but whatever. No, it shouldn't even have been that movie. And the reason that it makes for a shitty... Look, it even could have been maybe a slasher movie, but the reason that this one in particular was like a boring slasher movie is because it's called Cocaine Bear, right? Like, if you found a VHS tape of this movie, like it was actually made in the 80s and you just found it in the rubble of an old video store, you'd be like, wow. And then you're like, oh, it's just kind of a slasher movie, but I guess the monster is a bear that did a bunch of cocaine. I guess something like that really happened. Well, you'd be like, okay, fine. And like Red Letter Media would watch it on Best of the Worst and be like, it was at least the premise was fun, but then it would end up being, people wandering around in the woods getting killed by a bear that looked like shit. So, and we'd all go, oh, well, that movie's okay. Yeah, it's not a masterpiece. And it was kind of drawn out and it was kind of dull. But the thing is this movie was the exact same thing with just more money. Like the bear was like CG and it was a good enough CG and it was whatever. Like it wasn't a guy in a suit going, rrr, rrr, rrr. Yeah. Okay. So it's like a nice facelift from the VHS bin. And, it moves along at a nice clip. I didn't get bored because people were like wandering around in the woods and the lighting was all bad and nothing was really happening forever. No, it's not like one of those slasher movies, but it would be like the jokes. It was so middling for a movie called Cocaine Bear. It clearly had a budget, and clearly because of the amount of violence in blood and kind of pretty fucked up gore, which sure. But it's like George Lucas is like, we're on the special effects. Yeah, you got to tell a story, bub. And it's got to keep my interest. And it's got to be like, well, what do you expect from a movie called Cocaine Bear? Well, yeah, Not a whole lot of story, maybe not, no. But something that makes it so that, okay, you could remake this same movie and just replace the bear, right? And it's like, oh, there's park rangers and coke dealer mob guys. Like, yeah, you could kind of just have them be anybody too, but maybe let's say it's even some of the same fucking people, a mom and her kids. That only fits into this premise. Like the cop who's like gone off on his own. Like, well, that's a trope of horror, you got of slasher movies. It's like, again, that's not what this should have been, though. That's the whole point. Is it could have been like, oh, it's a movie about Bigfoot, and he's actually a scary Bigfoot monster. Like, minus the cocaine plane crash thing in the beginning of the movie, you could have just done that, and it would have been the exact same movie, right? Or, like, it was a crazy lumberjack who thinks he's the real Paul Bunyan or something. And the same thing where people are staring like, whoa, what's happening? Whoa! And it's like, why would that be going on? And we, again, we tried to kind of do a little rewrite of the movie on the last podcast. And, a suggestion I made was, okay, let's have people after the cocaine bear, but because, the backpack got hooked on him somehow. And they're like, oh, there's a tracking device in it. So they're trying to find that coke. The bear is just the reason that it's moving around. And the bear is the reason that it's kind of hard to get because bears can climb trees and bears can kill you. So they're like, okay, we got to figure this out. And maybe it's just a bunch of idiots. Like it's some bumbling cops, some stupid coked up drug dealer guys. And, who could be like, everyone should have been more of a caricature because the movie, You go to find a movie called Cocaine Bear, and it's sort of a slasher movie with generic characters in it. Too many generic characters, too, but I'll leave the too much plot lines and people jammed in thing. That's fine. That's just any bad movie. And I don't want to give anyone an excuse to be like, well, but it's supposed to just be dumb. Like, yeah, well, then it wasn't dumb enough. And it was full of and it's not supposed to be dumb jokes that fall flat either. You know what I mean? It's just like, bears can't climb trees, can they? It's like, that's the one thing they do. What? It was like Full House, but there was a cocaine bear. And that's the problem. I say that even. It makes it sound more interesting than it really was. I was like nodding off during this thing. And, oh, right. So I was like, it should have just been this movie where there's like a lot of close calls. There's people after the bear. They're stupid. They're bumbling. They run into each other. They make little truces, whatever. That's like most of the movie. And people get bored because they need some violence. Let's have some people get shot, right? Like, okay, there's like mob guys, after this cocaine bear, and there's cops and park rangers and things. Like everybody in this scenario has guns, right? So the park rangers shooting at people with a shotgun. As a matter of fact, it could have been a pretty good wild, sort of a comedy, but with a lot of. It didn't have to be like a Guy Ritchie movie, but, people having near misses and shootouts. And so people get shot. People die because the kind of people who are following a bear around trying to get the $1 billion worth of cocaine out of its fanny pack are going to shoot at each other if they get in each other's way and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. Some people get shot and you're like, okay, this movie has some of that kind of stuff in it. And, because my original idea was it just out of nowhere, there's no violence till the very end. But still, okay, there's a little intrigue. There's a little bit of crime stuff. No moms and no kids. What the fuck was that? Why are we accepting that? That didn't make this movie totally stupid. The kids weren't funny. They shoehorned in this lesson about parenting and being responsible in a movie called Cocaine Bear. That was dumb. Also, someone else made this comment, but I will share it here. This movie felt like it was made by somebody's mom who has only ever heard of cocaine in the news. I'm not even watched a movie like Pulp Fiction or something or Blow or anything where you actually see it happen, right? And certainly have never done it. Those kids eat handfuls of it and that's not funny because they do that and you're like, oh my God, and then nothing happens. Nothing happens. They kind of later, they're like, I'm so tired. It's yeah, they'd be dead, but let's say they're not dead. They'd be starting a business. You know what I mean? They'd be, those little kids would start embezzling money from the stock market, or they'd just be like, here's what we need to do, man. All of this funny Coke humor could have happened, you know? Like, oh, yeah. And it's like, well, they can't put that in a movie. It's like the movie's called Cocaine Bear. And it had the kids, like, eating cocaine. So, okay, fine. If that's, like, too much, then take the kids out of the goddamn movie, but have... Like, that would have been the other great part of it, that everyone after this bear, right, we're all cokeheads, like, and acted like it. They're stupid, fucking like, oh yeah, here's what we're gonna do. They all have these horrible bad ideas. You know, it's like, the cops are after, let's say they're just crooked. There's no good cops in this at all. Let's say, like, in my version of this movie. There's no, like, well-meaning guy that gets double-crossed. There's nothing. There's just, like, crooked cops just out to get it for themselves. And we're like, oh, it's gonna look real nice in our evidence locker, haha. So they all have coke on them, and, like, the park rangers are kind of coked up, and it's like, because it does take place in the 80s. So a reason to just go like, why are these people all like wound up and stupid and so fucking interested in finding this thing? They're all coked up and they're a mess. And you write it, you pay those writers, or you find somebody that understands how that kind of thing works, and you just have it be this like, you have it be that, you know, you put on Half-Baked with your friends when you're all smoking weed. This would be a fun movie to be like, let's get coked up and watch Cocaine Bear. Because I want to see pink neon lights and white suits and fucking Uzis. Everything that happened in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Like, I want, yeah, Hawaiian shirts and bloody noses and razor blades and broken glass and screaming and topless women and gunfire. That is what this movie should have fucking had in it if they're going to have the gall to call it Cocaine Bear and base it off of, you know, the true story. Yeah, the thing died in like 2 seconds. But that's the thing. Get ready for this. My version of it is going to be a little bit closer to being realistic because in what I would have preferred, the bear also would have died in like an hour or less or whatever it would be. Because see, the climax of the movie would be whoever survives all of the coke and all of the knife fights and gunshot wounds and screaming prostitutes and things that should be in a movie with that name. When finally, they corner the bear in its cave. And it's like, okay. And they have a bit of a truce with each other. They're like, okay. We can't fight a bear on our own. And it should have been a big, you know, yeah, like whatever the biggest, like maybe it was like a black bear in the movie and they're kind of like, you can spook them easily. And it's a little funny because then it's like, oh, they're not normally violent. So it's on coke. So now it's a monster movie serial killer for some fucking stupid reason. No, you're like, yeah, it's like a California Kodiak. You know, it's one of those things. It's like a monster, a scary bear, but they've kind of been shooting at it and stuff. You know, it'll run away from that. But they corner it, and for some reason, we'll make up some sort of reason why once it gets cornered and they're all trying to figure out what to do, maybe it finally relaxes, whatever. But then it gets into the coke and starts eating it for whatever reason. And they're like, oh, fuck, it's eating the cocaine. What are we going to do? And it's like, oh, maybe like it'll eat it and its heart will explode. We can at least just get whatever's left or something. Or they're like, oh, no, this is happening. What are we going to do? And they're like, all right, you know, like let's rush it. And then, you know, a regular bear could kill all these people. But they're like, no, we're just going to start shooting at it. Probably not with the correctly large, you know, bear hunting rifles or a Casull 454 or anything that you could maybe kill a bear with that you might have if you're some lunatic criminal or crooked cop or whatever. But it's like, oh, multiple people shooting at this thing is only enraging it, and it's not going down because it's on cocaine. And then we enter the part where the bear kills everybody. It just rends them limb from limb in a way that even a threatened bear, like even a polar bear, you know, the one bear that you're fucked, whether it's on drugs or not. Like if you have a gun that's not quite big enough, you're done if one of those goes after you. And so, you know, now they're dealing with something that's like a real monster. And the fun of the movie would be, of course we know that's going to happen or something like it, right? It's called Cocaine Bear. And maybe you just get lulled into a sense of security because you're like, okay, haha, it's a violent, crazy, wacky movie with all sorts of 80s cocaine references and all sorts of things like that in it. And that's, that gets you, you're like, okay, I get it. It's called Cocaine Bear because they're just trying to catch the thing. It's the MacGuffin in the film, right? So, like, oh yeah, that's why. And then you're like, yeah, it's not going to be a thing where it actually does the thing we heard about on that social media post where it's like the bear was the apex predator on the planet. Oh, by the way, I wanted to share something with you about that real quick. We've gotten to the end of the movie. It just rips everybody apart and there's no survivors. Nobody. And the bear dies. And it's just a nihilistic, fucking violent cocaine bear nightmare the way that it would maybe play out in real life. I don't know. But I do want to mention something else. This is a really good time to talk for a second about viral marketing. See, I had seen posts about, like, oh, did you hear about when they dropped a duffel bag full of coke out of a plane and the bear ate it and died later? But it's like, in that moment, it was probably the apex predator on the planet, and people are commenting on it like, wow. And it's like this meme that's posted around. And then a few years later, about the time it takes to make a movie, well, no, shorter than the amount of time, honestly, it takes to actually make a movie. You'll notice that my point being is that meme wasn't organic. Or maybe right at first it was like that. It was a real event that happened. I'm sure there's a real article about it. But they do this shit all the time where they go for a long time before whatever it is comes out, a movie usually. And they make this thing and it goes like viral. Basically, that post was sort of manufactured to make it seem that like, wow, they finally made a movie about this. That's crazy. But they're the people that made that movie are the reason you've seen that post. That's what and if you look at the timing and you look at like some of the original sites that are hosting it, you can follow like, oh, they're owned by like a movie studio and they're part of Universal. Like that's a big thing. Like when Deadpool came out, there was all of this like love for Deadpool all over Imgur and Reddit and all those things. And it was like, oh, man, like, because Deadpool has been a comic that, I mean, I liked and everything, but it's been around for, I don't know, since the 90s, forever. It's a crazy movie. But all of a sudden, like, people on the internet, like, randomly fell in love with it. And it was like a little bit after Ryan Reynolds played the, like, shitty Deadpool in the Wolverine movie. And it was actually, the tail was wagging the dog. It was you were seeing all those things that made you remember or fall in love with for the first time how zany Deadpool is leading up to this movie that didn't have, the biggest budget or whatever. It was great. And it might have been great if hardly anyone in the world cared about Deadpool, but they actually got people to care about Deadpool. But you just see these posts, and then when the movie comes out, you're like, oh, that thing that I organically decided that I liked on my own is now a movie, so I'm really super connected to it. That is how you do viral marketing, if you notice that. And some of you right now are disagreeing with me, not because logically it seems that I'm wrong, but you're reflecting on some things and you're going, no, I have my own ideas. Yeah, no, you don't. And they're banking on the fact that people do not accept going, oh, I got fooled. You'll notice how I just did it, though. I was like, oh, yeah, I like Deadpool, and oh, yeah, Cocaine Bear. It's not like when the movie came out, I suddenly was like, oh, my God. It was more like after it came out, and it clearly had kind of a big budget, even though it was boring and stupid and a missed opportunity and everything. I was like, oh, I kind of like walked back through the timing of when that first started popping up. And I got fooled. And see, the reason that I can see through this shit, and you can't always, is because I'm willing to admit when I've been fooled. Publicly, I'm doing it right now. Once you can admit that, that pop punk band you love so much actually sucks, you just found it when you were 13 and first started jerking off and having feelings. So you get all connected to this thing and you refuse to believe that they're fucking molested underage fans. Like, you just can't. It's not because it's good. It's because you found it when you were in that time where you find a band, you fall in love with it forever. That's why that type of tripey, dramatic, boo-hoo music was always, it was never targeted at like older teenagers or 20-year-olds. Yeah, the 20-year-olds like it. Yeah, they started liking it earlier. It's like smoking. Most people start way before they're 18. Not in their 40s. But sometimes it looks cool. And this is CBD, as I've often said. But, yeah. You'll hear something like that. You'll be like, no. It's actually that Blink-182 makes the best music in the world. I'm like, no, they don't. I was older when it came out, so to me, it looked like how it looked. And I'm not big. They're an all right thing. There's things that are so much worse. I just can't think of any examples because they're all terrible. And the big thing is that, again, I'm willing to admit there's records that I'll go back and I'll listen to and I'll be like, oh, this isn't, I think I just like this because I was a kid. I'll see it again now. They come back and they're older. I'm like, I think I just want a time machine back to being 15. I don't really want to see Mushroomhead, whatever it is. But I digress. I'm willing to admit when I get fooled, so I tend to be able to see through this shit. If you're one of those people that's like, no, the values my parents beat into me are the real ones. Instead of going like, oh, yep. And, this goes so much further than, they know that if you show someone music, I'm just going to stick to the music thing, they're not going to like it, or they might, but if you're like, look, they're going to be like, But if they think they found it on their own, then they have this personal connection to it and they're going to love it forever. And even when they put out a crappy album, they're going to be like, I found this. They'll get mad at other people when it gets popular, but they won't stop listening because it's theirs. Even though, very intentionally, some big new, indie rock thing that's everybody's darling wasn't something you stumbled on. They very strategically put their new demos in old, in used record stores and had them play at like a cool punk rock bike rally sponsored by PBR. And it's just everywhere you want to be, but it really feels like you're just finding it at these things. But it's happening all over the place, and it costs a lot of money and whatever. So when you see like a popular internet meme or trend become a movie, this is just going to be fun for you. I'm done kicking sand in your face. I'm sorry. And it's not that I'm smarter than you. It's more that like I just have no, pride connected to finding stuff early or always like it's like I am right frequently, but I don't always have to be. I'm pretty willing to be wrong, which means I can sort of piece together things in the future. Like I'm like, oh yeah, they got me. This was marketing. I didn't discover this. It's not an inside joke with my friends that magically every friend group has all at the same time, all at once somehow. No one questions how that seems a little suspicious. No. I'm willing to go like, they got me. Yeah, and I want you to be like that too. That's the real thing. I'm not just pissing in your face. I want you to be able to go like, oh shit, yeah, the timing of when this came out, I really thought it was based off of this thing, but it turns out the thing was put there by them way ahead of the release. They're thinking ahead a few years, and that's the thing. Things like movies and stuff, TV series, whatever it is, it takes a long time. And this is a long game. This is like, if you're in marketing or whatever, it's like, or you're probably familiar with it already, but like if you're a person trying to market yourself or whatever, just know that it's like, this advice doesn't even work for you. If you wanted to try this tactic yourself, for example, it's like you have to have the ability and the money and the connections to get the worm in people's heads, pay the fucking $50,000 to make sure that it's on top of all these listicles and shit that just feel like they're being written by a person who's sharing their opinions when really they're like pushing a specific set of things that they're supposed to push. It's the same thing as like old school and modern radio is just beyond nothing, but it's like, even when people thought radio was cool, like in the 90s, it was still like the program directors are getting stuff sent to them from the labels along with essentially bribes and other things to make sure that the singles with all of the groups with all the money behind them get played the most. And yeah, that just ran out of control with no regulation. You're like, how come everything on the radio is so boring and bland and bad? But then also, I think regulations shouldn't happen, and you don't get that it's like when the people with the most money just did get to have their way over everything else year after year and cycle after cycle and layer after layer. It's like all you get to listen to is just shit that already got popular on TikTok. By the way, not organically either. They figured that out too. It's like TikTok trends and things are easily manipulated by, and whatever. It's just big money. It's like, I got into an argument with someone once who is I would say even kind of like a radical leftist, as radical as I can be. I'm, a little bit more subdued than this, but, it's like, yeah, they use a lot of like marketing and propaganda techniques to get people to do things. She's like, really? You think TV commercials were like, whoa, shouldn't you be a lot smarter than this? They're not using TV commercials to like divide people and swing elections and things. They're using the kind of shit I was just talking about where they use like a viral trend on the internet that makes it look like it just came from like a person or whatever. Right now, too, there's totally, I saw it on another podcast, but there's North Korean propaganda in the form of like American kids telling people, it's like, I'm a tour guide there, and it's actually not that bad. But then they're showing videos that if people have gone and debunked, it's like, this is like a forced participation thing they're showing. It's not people just having fun at a park, and then you realize it's like through many layers of different stuff. There's nothing stopping North Korea from like probably, yeah, a few of the links in the chain are kind of wearing masks that make it seem like they're not coming from there, but they're basically gassing up and paying influencers to like say this stuff. And it's like, well, no, like, I really believe it. It's like, it's clearly not someone from North Korea, but it's like, you got to realize that's how everything works now. Like a person, you know, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It's a thing where, you know, it's not some like Chinese guys with like machine guns, like pointing them at a fucking TikTok influencer just off camera. They own a holding corporation that owns this other company that owns this thing that gives out sponsorships for certain types of content. They use their ability to manipulate eyeballs on ads and algorithms and stuff to push certain kind of things to the top. And it's like, you almost could not even directly pay them. You could almost just make it so that if you make videos that are saying good things about like North Korea, for example, I just get the most views and the most offers for sponsorships when I talk about this. And you could just get people to move in that direction. But again, if you're marketing yourself, it's like, you don't have that kind of money. You don't have that. That's like government or huge business amounts of cash to like basically push things around. So you're not even telling people what to say. You're just, it's like digging a hole in the beach so that water flows into it. It's like you're just moving the sand in the water. Oh, look, the water goes in the hole. It's going where you want it. You're not pushing the water. You're not touching the water. That's just gravity, and it's going where it feels like it's getting the path of least resistance. It's, you know, you're just like removing obstacles more than, so it's like, there's probably not even someone in a suit and tie going like, listen, kid, if you say all these good things. No, it's like this nudging process. And the worst part about that is you can't prove anyone's doing that, or it's really, 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 really hard. So like, what? We're not like, show us where we paid one influencer to say any of this stuff, but they can kind of like move everything else around. So they kind of walk in this direction. Like that thing where the lady, the what is that? The anti-fat shaming influencer lady who was, by the way, they didn't even pick someone who was overweight. I mean, whatever. But in the California school district, that was like, you know, a bowl of donuts and a salad. The only real difference is just like how society views it. There's nothing wrong with the donuts. Are they spoiled? And that was someone who was working directly for Nestle, I think, because they're like, oh, all this stuff where people aren't eating sugar anymore. They're like, well, we can't get them to stop, you know, understanding that health is important, so we can shame them through this other channel. We can go like, hey, telling people to put the donuts down, you're fat shaming them. And doctors are, because there's truth to it too. It's like doctors will, you know, sometimes overlook certain things and only focus on your weight, although a lot of times it is a problem if it's high enough. But yeah, sure, everyone has those experiences, or when you're a woman and they don't listen to you. Okay, so there's some reality to it. So people tend to want to believe it, but the Nestle thing didn't work because everyone immediately fucking figured out that she was like someone that worked for them, right? So instead, you find little fires that already exist. There's already people who've been bullied their whole life, and they go on the internet and complain about it. We need to stop using these words, and we need to da-da-da. And you're like, okay, so that's a real thing, and people are listening to them. That's really cool. Well, we could probably weaponize that idea to kind of bend the social norms a little bit, you know, shame people from saying that certain kinds of foods are bad because they get a lot of backlash every time they open their mouths from these people. So we can just sort of manipulate things a little bit so they get more and more attention. They have, oh, look, they're all finding each other more easily. We're setting things up. You know, it's like, oh, they're getting sponsors and stuff like that. The more they talk about all this shit. So it makes it louder and louder and louder in a way that isn't natural. Yeah, of course, there's somebody for everybody. There's a little group for everyone to belong to. There's a grievance that everyone has. But they would only get as big as they would get. Even with the internet. The internet is hardcore manipulated at this point. You're like, oh, you know, again, I'm just going to use this because it's kind of a safe one, I guess. But it's like, again, you know, it's like the fat acceptance. Like weighing 400 pounds is just as healthy as anything. It's like, no, it isn't. And we wouldn't be hearing that much about it if it was just its own thing. But since, again, incentives are being kind of magically, it's like, oh, look, a trail of donuts is leading over to this box with a stick in it. It's like, they're going to follow that, you know, and the trail is attention and dollars, maybe. I won't make that much fun. But it's definitely a thing, and they just kind of end up over there. And then when you go, oh, you're getting paid. These people are getting paid by Nestle and Nabisco because everyone's putting junk food away, and they're losing money, like Fox News when they would be like, hybrid cars make you a homo. And everyone's like, I'm no homo. I'll pay twice as much for gas, because all these oil companies were afraid they'd lose half their profits when cars that would get 50 miles a gallon are being released. They'd be like, well, we can't tell people that they shouldn't save money on... Well, just tell them that anything that isn't a giant truck makes them a sissy, because we know that they're already a closet case and afraid of their secret of not being manly is discovered. Those are easy, and those guys are easy to fuck with. You can show them a diagram that like, oh yeah, like Halliburton and this huge oil company just owned Fox News, and they were being like, the letters were coming from like one inside the same building. Like, they say this so we don't lose money. They'll be like, I don't know about that. And like, okay. It's like, I still like my truck. It's like, they're easy. But, the more collegiate, educated types, it's a little bit harder, so you got to be sneaky. They can't find out. And even then, I mean, once they're in deep, it's tough. But, they find out that, some giant sugar company is behind all of the healthy at any weight shit. Because you're like, well, they're not behind it. I'm not getting paid by anybody. But you can just move the attention algorithms around because you have that kind of money. So it kind of, you're leaving a lot of dry tinder out and walking away before the campers even show up. And then when a forest fire starts, because they're like flicking cigarette butts out the window, you knew they were going to do that. You knew they were going to sit there and get drunk and flick cigarette butts into the woods. So you intentionally did something where there's a lot more dry stuff, maybe an old gas can laying around, and it all catches on fire. But you're going to be like, yeah, well, there was maybe some evidence that some people were here earlier, and then maybe some crap got left behind, but it all burned up. It was those people. It was those people throwing their cigarette butts and not putting out their campfire. But that the forest wouldn't have burned down if the big company that wanted the forest burned down hadn't have put all the flammable shit there, so it looked like an accident. Well, yeah, you can do that with social media algorithms and influencers and that whole system of shit very easily. So people will go like, no, see, it's an organic grassroots thing. It's not astroturfing. I really hold these beliefs that me and a bunch of other people suddenly started having all at once, and it became the most important thing in the world out of nowhere. That happens all the time by itself, right? Just like Cocaine Bear. So maybe that's what Cocaine Bear was really about, and I'm an idiot, because they made the movie with boring, unfunny jokes, characters that have nothing to do with hunting bears or cocaine or comedy or fun or anything you'd ever want to watch. It was just kind of this paint by the numbers, middle of the road, kind of just bland movie that had some real crazy kills in it, though. Why don't you go kill somebody and film it? I don't care. Like, yes, good. We all like violence. Hooray. But we all like Ray Liotta. But just like nothing happened in that movie. Okay, so it's like Ice Cube's kid gets into a fight in a bathroom with some skateboard kids, and then they walk around saying stuff to each other that isn't funny. And like the park ranger lady doesn't like those stupid kids, and she's with that guy that seems like a character from Tim and Eric, and they say things to each other that aren't funny, and they run into the runaway kids who are kids in the first place, and they're not funny, and they're not interesting, and the mom's trying to find them, because mom's got to find her kids, just like the mama bear. Oh my god, it's all tied together with bear culture and cubs, instead of with, again, everything I already said about how it should have been this goddamn neon switchblade drive-by shooting cocaine nightmare thing that ended with everyone getting eaten by a bear. Like, and if you're like, no, I liked it not be, like, look me in the eye, having listened to everything I said, and be like, I think it was good and it wasn't a missed opportunity. I dare you, I double dare you, motherfucker, tell me that it was like, no, it's great, that it felt like 90s sitcom writers who had never somehow done cocaine wrote a slasher movie with no character, like too many characters that weren't interesting, doing nothing that anyone cared about for no reason. And then a few of them kind of get picked off by a bear, and people like fall out of an ambulance and, oh, her face got mashed off by the street. Like, you could just watch a Faces of Death video while doing cocaine, and that would be a better movie. And you know what? I think that's what I'm about to go do. Go fuck yourself.
The Reverend John Wheeler podcast takes zero responsibility for the words, actions, or ideas of its host, guests, or listeners. Though the people on the screen may at times be speaking directly to you and may occasionally give you direct calls to action, neither Reverend John nor the Alchemical Cocktail Lounge are under any moral or legal obligation to answer for the potentially disastrous repercussions that may arise if you are stupid enough to actually follow the orders of a raving lunatic. Think for yourself and do whatever you want, because you're on your own. If anyone ever tries to sue this podcast podcast, black SUVs will converge on your location in the darkness of night and you will never be seen again. Remember to like and subscribe.